In 1920, if you gave this man $100, he promised you $150 back in just 6 weeks. He didn't have a factory. He didn't have a product. He didn't have a secret gold mine. He didn't even have a college degree. He only had a piece of paper the size of a postage stamp. And yet, for one golden summer in Boston, he was the most powerful man in the city. He had cheated 40,000 people out of $15 million, roughly $230 million in today's money. It's that his name became a permanent entry in the dictionary of human greed. We use his name almost every day. It's a Ponzi scheme, we say. But before Ponzi was a scheme, it was a human being. Charles Ponzi wasn't a shadowy mastermind hiding in a basement. He was a dapper, 5'2" Italian immigrant with a smile that could melt the skepticism of a stone statue. He nearly toppled the entire economy of New England. And here is the most dangerous part. His empire didn't collapse because people stopped believing in him. In fact, on the day his world fell apart, people were still trying to hand him their life savings. It didn't collapse because of a lack of faith. It collapsed because the one thing you can never lie to, the arithmetic, finally came for its pound of flesh. Today, we go back to the humid streets of 1920s Boston to look at the international reply coupon, the $15 million lie. Charles Ponzi was born Carlo Ponzi in Lugo, Italy in 1882. He didn't come from poverty. He came from a family that had once been wealthy, but had fallen on hard times. Ponzi wasn't just hungry for food. He was hungry for the status his family had lost. In 1903, he stepped off the boat in Boston with exactly $2.50 in his pocket. He later joked that he had $200 in hopes, but a gambler on the ship had taken the rest. For the next 16 years, Ponzi was the definition of a serial failure. He was kicked out of the University of Rome for spending his tuition on cafes and theaters. In America, he washed dishes, slept on floors, and was fired from a restaurant for shortchanging customers. He wasn't just a failure, he was a petty criminal. He spent 3 years in a Canadian prison for forging a check to help a failing bank. Shortly after his release, he was caught smuggling Italian immigrants across the border and landed in a federal prison in Atlanta. By 1919, Ponzi was 37 years old. By the standards of the time, he was a middle-aged man with nothing to show for his life but a few prison records and a long list of burned bridges. He settled in Boston, married a woman named Rose Necco, and tried to go straight. But Ponzi wasn't looking for steady work. He wasn't looking for a paycheck. He was looking for a big idea. He wanted to prove, to the bankers who looked down on him and the elites who ignored him, that he could beat the system at its own game. He didn't want a job, he wanted a legacy. Success, as they say, often starts with a single letter. In the summer of 1919, Ponzi opened a piece of mail from an office in Spain. Inside was a small, unassuming slip of paper, an international reply coupon, or IRC. In 1919, if you wanted to send a letter to someone in another country and pay for their return postage, you couldn't send them American stamps. They wouldn't work in Spain. So you sent an IRC. The recipient would take that coupon to their local post office and trade it for local stamps. Ponzi, with his mind for quick math, noticed a massive loophole. Because of the economic devastation of World War I, currencies in Europe had plummeted in value. An IRC bought in Italy cost the equivalent of about 1 cent in US dollars. But when that same coupon was brought to the United States, it could be traded for 6 cents worth of American stamps. That is a 500% profit. On paper, this was arbitrage, buying low in one market and selling high in another. It was perfectly legal. Ponzi founded the Securities Exchange Company. He didn't hide his secret. He told everyone exactly how it worked. He told them he was going to buy millions of these coupons in Europe, ship them to America, and cash them in.
Madness. Give me your money. In 45 days,
I'll give you 50% interest. In 90 days, I'll double it. But here is where the wizard became a witch. To actually make the money Ponzi was promising, he would have needed warehouses the size of stadiums, filled floor to ceiling with mail coupons. He would have needed a fleet of ships crossing the Atlantic every week, carrying nothing but tiny slips of paper. At the height of his operation, there were only about 27,000 IRCs in circulation in the entire world. To pay back his investors, Ponzi would have needed to buy and sell 160 million of them. The coupons were never the business. They were the story he told so that people wouldn't look at what he was actually doing with his hands. In February 1920, Ponzi had $5,000. By May, he had $400,000. By July, he was bringing in $1 million a week in cash. Why did people believe him? Why didn't they see the red flags? Because he did the one thing a liar must do to survive. He paid out. Early investors walked into his office at 27 School Street, handed over their cash, and 45 days later, they walked out with 50% more. In the world of finance, nothing is more intoxicating than watching your neighbor get rich while you stay poor. Take Salvatore D'Angelo, a local grocer. He put in $500, his life savings. 6 weeks later, Ponzi handed him $750. D'Angelo didn't just tell his friends, he became a walking advertisement. Within a month, his entire extended family had scraped together $3,000 to give to the wizard. Why was the environment so perfect for this? America had just emerged from the Great War. People were restless. Trust in traditional banks was low. Most importantly, there was no SEC, no FDIC, no federal oversight. If a man looked you in the eye and spoke your language, whether it was Italian or the language of the working class, Ponzi didn't succeed because people were stupid. He succeeded because he gave them a way to feel like they were finally winning. He wasn't just selling a return on investment. He was selling justice against the bankers who had ignored the little guy for decades. By the summer of 1920, Ponzi was a god. He bought a mansion in Lexington with air conditioning and a heated pool. He bought a controlling stake in the Hanover Trust Bank, the very kind of institution that would have denied him a loan a year earlier. He was the Wizard of Boston, and he famously remarked that his only problem was that he didn't have enough clerks to count the money fast enough. Every scheme has a D-Day. For Ponzi, it started when he hired a publicist named William McMasters. McMasters wasn't a financial genius, but he was observant. He looked at the stacks of cash coming in and the lack of coupons going out. He realized there was no there. McMasters went to the Boston Post and declared that Ponzi was hopelessly insolvent. At the same time, the Post hired a man named Clarence Barron, the financial legend who founded Barron's magazine. Barron did what the investors hadn't. He did the math. He pointed out that to support Ponzi's claims, there would have to be an enormous shortage of IRCs at post offices. But there wasn't. The Post discovered that Ponzi wasn't even investing his own money in the scheme. He was keeping it in liquid cash or real estate. The panic was instantaneous. The lines that once formed to give Ponzi money now formed to get it back. Ponzi, ever the performer, stayed outside his office, handing out coffee and donuts to the angry crowd, telling them their money was safe. He even paid out $2 million in 3 days to try and stop the bleeding. But you cannot stop a mathematical landslide. On August 12, 1920, Charles Ponzi walked into the federal building and surrendered. He was $7 million in debt. He had 0 coupons in his vault. He had been paying investor A with the money from investor B, and when the new investors stopped coming, the music stopped playing. The scheme didn't collapse because of a run on the bank. It collapsed because the arithmetic finally became undeniable. Charles Ponzi died in 1949 in a charity ward in Rio de Janeiro. He was blind, partially paralyzed, and didn't have enough money for a decent burial. But while the man died, his model became immortal. From Bernie Madoff's $65 billion empire to the latest guaranteed return crypto rug pull, the DNA of the Ponzi scheme remains exactly as Charles designed it: an opaque strategy, high returns with seemingly zero risk, and the use of new capital to pay old promises. We like to think we are smarter than the people of 1920. We have the internet, we have regulators, we have history books. But the Ponzi scheme doesn't target our intelligence, it targets our desire. Years later, broke and forgotten, Ponzi was asked if he felt guilty. He smiled and said, "I gave them the best show that was ever staged in their territory since the landing of the Pilgrims." He never apologized. He saw himself as an entertainer. And the most terrifying part? Even after he was exposed, some of his investors still loved him. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the dream. And as long as people want to believe in a shortcut to wealth, there will always be a Charles Ponzi waiting to sell them the map. If you want to understand the crashes, the scams, and the masterminds that built and broke the financial world, subscribe to the Financial History channel. Next time, we're looking at the South Sea Bubble, a disaster so large it destroyed the life savings of Sir Isaac Newton and nearly bankrupted the British Empire. Tell us in the comments, do you think modern crypto is just a digital version of what Ponzi did in 1920? Let's talk about it below.